working for you. A weekly talk radio program which highlights developments of national interest and the activities of your St. Kitts Nevis government. Join host Roy Williams as he presents news, views, reports, and interviews about everything regarding the activities of the Team Unity government and the building of our communities and the development of St. Kitts Nevis. Tune in and call in to interact with your government and share your views regarding the upward forward development of your community and our beautiful Twin Island Federation. Working for you is weekly, every Wednesday live from 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. on ZIZ Radio, Win FM, and Sugar City FM with rebroadcast on participating stations. Working for you.
Good afternoon, and I welcome you to another edition of Working for You. This is our second program for the year 2018. We thank you for tuning in. I am your host, Roy Williams. Today we are going to be looking at youth, sports, and culture. Three important aspects of our development here in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. And I have here with me on today's program the Permanent Secretary in the Ministries of Youth, Sports and Culture, Mr. Stanley Knight. Mr. Knight, welcome to this program.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
It is certainly not your first time on this program.
No, it's not.
And you're always welcome.
Thank you.
Sports, youth, and culture are very important to national development. Whenever we speak about these three things in St. Kitts and Nevis, it is about how they are helping us to develop as a people, communally, and individually. Today, Mr. Knight will speak to us about policy. Sometimes there is no policy, but he will speak to youths, sport, and culture in terms of what the government is doing in putting policy in place. So there is already a national youth policy, and a cultural policy and the sports policy presently are being crafted. Mr. Knight, could you explain what policy is, first of all? What is policy? When we speak about policy, what are we talking about?
Good afternoon again, Mr. Williams, and it's a pleasure to be put on the spot as a student. Ultimately, policy is an articulation of the government's mission, vision, and values in a particular sector. What it is hoped is that by crafting policy, you don't have the arbitrary directions, you don't have the era of where an idea is a good idea, but it's a good idea for today. So persons implement it today, but then what happens tomorrow? What happens next year? How does this contribute, as I say, to the long-term vision, to the outcomes of what defines us as a nation, what defines us as a federation, as a people? And that is why policy is of such extreme importance, because what it does is that it gives a benchmark to the progress that we make in these particular areas.
Okay. So a policy basically is amendable. it can be amended.
Of course. A policy can be amended, and it is normally recommended that over a period of time that you revisit, just as your constitution from time to time
Yes.
may be amended. It does not mean that it was a bad constitution to start, but what it means is that it continues to evolve with us as a people.
Right.
What you will find is that the policy also informs the national strategic plan within the area. And the national strategic plan is, I think, what more persons are accustomed of hearing about, because that's where it gets exciting. It defines the actionable areas within a very specific period of time, 4 years, 5 years. What is it, where is it that we want to be in 4 years, 5 years? What programs are we going to run? How do we get there? Persons often get excited by national strategic plans and a bit less excited about policy. But without the policy, then these plans will be haphazard, willy-nilly.
So the policy informs the plan.
So that the policy
guides the
informs,
plan.
right, informs and guides the plan.
Okay. Now you are the permanent secretary, of course, in the Ministry of Sports.
Yes.
And sports is an important part of our development as a people.
Oh,
We
yes.
speak about sports and development. We can speak about it in so many ways.
Right.
What is the importance of having a national sports policy in terms of where we want to go, in terms of our development as a people?
We first of all have to look at what sports does for the country, which is extremely important. If I may, the sports policy is based on 3 pillars. Sport for all. Sport for all is important because we all know the old adage. A healthy nation is a wealthy nation.
Yes.
And when we speak of wealth, we're not just talking money. We are talking well-being of the nation. So one of the things that we have to realize is that we have an unnaturally high rate and an unnaturally high mortality rate when it comes to non-communicable lifestyle type diseases. As we all know, physical activity offsets this. Now, let's do the domino of that. If we are a healthier nation, then it means that we have a lower health bill. A lower health bill means that more government revenue can now be invested in other areas to help to build us both economically, socially, physically. You have that overall development of the country.
Yes.
So that is one. The other side of it is, of course, the natural social engagement of sport. Think of it this way. When you look at, for instance, who you were in school with, very often you can't remember who you sat with, who you sat next to in that class, but you will remember the persons who are on your football team. You will remember those persons. So it's a process of natural engagement. And then, of course, this is the 21st century. Economics is such a big thing when it comes to sports. So it does give us the avenues for, it gives us a possibly new revenue stream, economic, stream within the country.
So those are 2 things that you mentioned. Of course, you mentioned health.
Yes.
Well, more than 2. You mentioned health and fitness.
Health and fitness.
You mentioned economics.
Social, right, economics and the social well-being that comes with it.
Leisure and recreation too.
Right. Yes, because persons do need to chill out.
Yes.
We do need to chill out. We do need to relax. We do need to take it easy from time to time. And one of the, for instance, initiatives that the Department of Sport is currently undertaking is looking at the community sports. We know that great investments have been made at the school level in terms of sports by the Department of Education. We are now looking at what happens to the family that wants to get out into the community fields and play. What happens to, forgive me for saying that, persons like you and I that are silver or golden or, a bit more refined in our years.
Yes.
What type of opportunity do we get to go out there and participate so that we are, and the sports policy speaks to that engagement. When we speak of sport for all, we are now speaking to that engagement. When we say all, as one person puts it, from the cradle to the grave. Someone once said, you can't be thinking, but think of it this way. In Japan, all children are taught to swim before the age of 6 months. It is a national engagement, so that it is that type of engagement that we have to think of when we think of a lifelong involvement in physical activity, recreation and leisure.
Sure. Now the opportunities as well that come through sports. Of course, you have scholarship opportunities.
Yes.
The opportunity of having your country represented, of course, on the international stage, giving publicity to your country, national pride, national identity. Also, we can think of the discipline and morale that can be achieved through involvement in sports.
Yes, and this is all, and this is the multifaceted nature. Sport is actually one of the vehicles for the Sustainable Development Goals, as you would know, because one of the, how should I put it, the platform of sports is no longer singular. Sport is really for all. So you do have persons from St. Kitts that are right now on the Leeward Islands team, where they are professional cricketers, where they are being paid. This is a full-time job where they are being paid, and it is their livelihood to play professional cricket. We have professional athletes. When you look at even beyond the engagement in the actual competition, think of it this way. Kim Collins last year was elected to the International Association of Athletics Federations executive as an athlete's representative. My understanding is that he got 800 and something votes, and it's normally two persons. The person that was second got like 200 and something votes. So, I mean, it gives you an idea. But this now means that he is now literally an employee of the IAAF. And then you have scholarship. We have persons who are currently off on, scholarship. You have Crook, BJ. You have several, and not just track athletes. You have basketballers that are out on scholarship. You have, I think, volleyballers that are out on scholarship. So you have this opportunity. And of course, think of it this way. The CPL last year was the most watched CPL of all times. And if my memory serves me correct, who was in the finals? St. Kitts Nevis Patriots. Unfortunately, we didn't take it last year, but you know that we're behind them again for this year.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about the policy. What is in it to really bring about this desired development? We spoke about so many things, health and fitness, of our people, scholarships, discipline and morale, the social benefits, the economic benefits. How is this going to be achieved? What is in the policy to really bring about this?
Okay, the policy actually does not yet exist.
Well, what are some of the things that you intend to put into the policy?
We are at the point of engagement where we are speaking with the Commonwealth and UNESCO in terms of putting together the necessary thing. But what we have been operating on is a framework. And the framework has 3 pillars. I mentioned one already in, sport for all. The second one is sport for development. And that's both social development and economic development. And the last pillar, very important, is sport for excellence, which I think I also just touched on. But apart from the pillars, it is what we hope to achieve through the policy. 1, we hope to achieve a point where we have a healthier nation, where we have a more active nation, where we have an engaged nation. One of the things that we have to remember is, simply put, darkness is the absence of light. Persons often say, oh, darkness coming in. It's not that darkness is coming in, it is that light is going out. So, the reason I said that is because where we have communities, where persons are involved, where persons are out there, where persons are in their community spaces, and they are engaging, families and communities are out there engaging, what that does is that it creates a barrier for the negative to come into that community. So we are looking at an overall healthier community. We also, therefore, in doing this, we have to look at things such as the rights of the child to play, which is one of the sustainable goals, the rights of the child in terms of engagement in physical activity. And then, if you're looking at the rights of the child in terms of the engagement in physical activity, you have to look at the protection and the safety of persons involved. You have to look at the definitions in terms of development, economic development. How do we create an incubator model which allows Joe Public who is interested, who may not be participating in sports, but loves sports, has a passion for it, and wants to turn this into a business? How do we create that incubation for him that allows him to do this? The policy has to speak to all of this. And then, what about the persons that are out there representing us? Those persons also have to be supported within the policy. We have to say to the policy, we have to say through the policy that we celebrate your quest for excellence. So these are just some of the global outcomes that a sports policy can embrace. And, I suppose I'm one of those persons that not just get excited by the plan, but also by the policy. So, yes.
So, but what are some of the initiatives taken presently by the Department of Sports in terms of the development of sports,
of sports,
men and women, athletes?
Right. The first thing is our initiative in terms of our physical facilities. Within the last 12 months, we have added 2 very key persons to our staff. One is basically a facility maintenance technician. Someone who, when the toilet breaks, can fix the toilet, when the door drops off, because persons don't realize it, but the 34 facilities that are currently under the care of the sports department has an invested value of over $200 million. Now, persons like to say $200 million of the government's money, but I like to say over $200 million of the people's money. So we have invested over $200 million in this. So we have added 2 persons. One is a facilitant, I keep getting that wrong somehow, a facility maintenance technician, and also a venues manager, someone with an engineering background who can actually do long-term plans and scope of work in order to upgrade. Why is this important? Let's just do a very quick scenario. You have someone who might be living in Diet Bay, and this is I think a perfect example. The Diet Bay football team, congrats, at the end of last season were promoted to the Premier League. But the majority of persons in the Diet Bay football team were working within the economic center of Bastia. So they leave their homes after 6 in the morning to come to Bastia to work and reach back to Diet Bay at 6 o'clock in the evening when the sun is set and they don't have time to practice. So what we have done is that we have now commissioned lights for the playing field directly below the Diet Bay Primary School so that they have a place that they can practice, but not just them. That the entire community who very often migrates to work, they commute to work, when they get back home, they have a place that mommy and daddy can take the child.
Yes.
So that type of investment we have added lights in Tabernacle, in Keon, in Boyd's, as well as we are looking at adding additional facilities. We are speaking with the newly formed St. Kitts Nevis Tennis Association, where we can add more tennis courts and upgrade the courts around the thing. So all of that is about engagement. So that is one. The other thing that we are doing, as I mentioned earlier, is we are looking at the programming from the department level. So we don't just want persons who go to a field and don't know what to do. We want to be able to provide activity at that field for them. So yeah.
Okay. So you're planning activities.
We are planning activities. We are implementing activities. We are safeguarding the NCAMAT plus the MATs, which everybody got so excited about. While they were used in Warner Park, they are designed so that you can have a multiplicity of function at all of our facilities, where we can, protect the grass and encourage wider use of the facilities by the community. So all of these are, initiatives that we are, currently undertaking.
Now, any upcoming major events for the year?
Oh yes. 3 immediately comes to mind. One, of course, everyone knows. CPL! Right. This is the biggest party in sports.
Yes.
Not plugging them, but the biggest party in sports. We also have the Caribbean, let me see if I get this right, the Caribbean Central Bank Governors Games. So that is all of the central banks, the Central Bank of Guyana, of Trinidad, of Barbados, the East Caribbean Central Bank, Bahamas, Jamaica, all of the central banks are coming here on the Easter weekend. I understand over 800 persons are coming to St. Kitts in a kind of a celebratory games. We are also having, I think it is the OECS Under-23 netball tournament, which is going to be here, I think, in July of this year. So those are just 3 of the things that immediately come to mind.
Okay, good. So we're on the move.
Oh yes.
With sports.
Yes. Sports is working for you.
It is working. Culture.
Oh yes.
Is another area in terms of where our people can be developed.
Oh yes.
It is a multifaceted concept, of course, whenever we speak about culture. And we cannot speak about culture without contextualizing it. So we speak about the culture of a particular society. So society and culture, although they are not the same thing, one cannot exist without the other.
As I like to say, they actually define each other.
They actually define each other. And a society is a group of people, of course, living within a defined geographical space with a certain set of values, beliefs, mores, norms, and so on, that somehow inform how they behave, their way of life,
Yeah.
how they dress, and things like that. I mean, if we were living in a cold country, we certainly will dress differently than we do here. We will have to get winter clothes and all of that sort of a thing. So the climate informs how they dress, their way of life. Our climate determines, of course, how we dress in life, clothing, and so on. Nowadays, I see some people in winter jacket and so on walking around town with the fur and all of that. And I really don't know what that comes from. It's certainly not a part of our culture.
Well,
But
yes.
But culture, how would you define it? How would you define culture?
Actually, I won't. But I will say this, and it's a little anecdote that I like to, that I give. Last year, when we started looking at the revision of the cultural policy, I said to someone had heard about it on the radio, and they met, and they said, well, how is that going? And I said, that's great, but we really do need to reach out to everyone. We really do need to reach out to everyone to give their input. I said, because the cultural policy is for everyone. And the person said, yeah, Pete, me too.
Right.
But what they didn't realize was when they said me and Pete, what they just did was that they defined themselves as being from St. Kitts Nevis, because the only place you go to in the world where people say me and Pete is St. Kitts Nevis. So, having used that, I can say what culture is that culture is the combined experiences. Whereas persons say it is our combined experiences, I like to add to that and say it is the combined experiences that defines us as a people. So that who we are, what we do, how we season our food, how we cook. I'll put it this way. If you go to a formal dinner and you have one fork and one knife, I will bet you that you are probably in America. Because if you were in Britain, you would have a different fork and a different knife for each course. Mm-hmm. But Americans, it's a different culture. And we need to understand that. If I invited you over for dinner and I cooked egg noodles in a soy sauce, you would say, wow, Mr. Knight, I didn't know that you could cook Chinese. Because just by what we eat, it defines. We look at how we dance, how we speak, what our value systems are. A child looks at you and hesitates to do something. And if you're from St. Kitts, you just look up and you say, monkey no? Monkey no want him to jump on. All of that, our combined experiences define us. And it is important. And what persons don't, where I think that the cultural policy is important, is that often persons don't understand that that has actual value and not just internal value. It has not just intrinsic value but also extrinsic value as well. And I think that the cultural policy is the document, the vision which informs that value and how and exactly how it benefits us.
Sure. Now, how does culture relate to our development as a people? What are some of the ways in which culture, our culture, which is unique, as you mentioned,
Yes.
can contribute to our development?
Okay. And for me to answer that, if you don't mind, I will delve a bit into the current aims of the draft cultural policy, because we actually have arrived at this stage where we have a new draft to the cultural policy. The first aim of this policy is culture as a form of culture as a mechanism for national identity. And that's important because our national identity, I'll put it this way, persons don't leave where they are to come and to jump on a plane or jump on a boat to visit a place that is exactly as where they left. So that difference, now what that does is that it has what is called brand value. Our brand is different. So that's the first thing. But that brand must now be invested. And this is where we start to get development. Because think of it this way. We often hear, when we look at some of the social ills that we now have, persons ask, how we get so? How did we get there? And how can we get back to who we are? So what the culture is doing, it is establishing a value system, a benchmark, as I mentioned earlier, a benchmark that we can aspire to when we want to be better. And then added to that, therefore, is it also has extrinsic value. Our music, our folklore, our cuisine, our dress, all of these things. The important thing right now, as you look at a lot of the regional meetings with regards to culture, at least 50%, 75% of every meeting is focused on the creation of economic activity within the cultural sector. Because one of the reasons that when people say that culture is dying, I wouldn't say that culture is dying. What I will say is that bread and butter issues are taking precedence over the practice of our culture. So if we can find ways to make our culture a bread and butter issue, we then ingrain with it a sustainable model for the practice of our culture. So all of these things add to our overall development. The final thing in terms of our development would be our part within the international society. Our uniqueness gives us a seat at the table. Because if we were not different and disparate from others, then we would have no value, no contribution to make to the wider community, to the global community, to the international, to the regional, to the sub-regional. If we are not bringing anything that is different to the table, if you have rice and your friend says, oh, I can come to dinner, I will bring rice, then you tell the friend, it's okay, don't bring the rice, just come to dinner because you will eat what I have. By bringing something different to the table, it gives us value.
Right. Now, if we as a people do not know our history, how can we really talk about culture? Because it seems to me sometimes, why do we do what we do? Why do we eat what we eat? Where did the breadfruit come from? Why it is that we have all of these salted meats and things like that, saltfish and red herring and pickled pig feet or trotters and all of that.
Which unfortunately is no longer poor people food.
Right. Do we know our history and how our history is basically part and parcel of what we do? Because if we don't understand our history, I don't believe that we can understand our culture.
If we don't understand our history, we won't understand our culture.
Mind you,
it's more-
culture is dynamic.
Culture
as
is
well.
dynamic.
It's not.
But I was going to say, and here is where I think sometimes we fail. First of all, we're all educators. So let's
Yes.
talk a little about education. Education is the acquisition of knowledge, skills, and attitudes, values, which lead to a change in behavior. Often, the problem with how we relate is that we gain the knowledge. So, in other words, we gain the knowledge, but we don't acquire the other things. We don't acquire the skills. We don't acquire the attitudes. And therefore, we don't see a change in behavior. Is the knowledge or the skills that we are gaining accurate? We have seen cases like, for instance, I think that the best example of that, forgive me, I hope I don't offend anyone, and if I do, my humblest apologies, but we have seen cases where there are persons playing masquerade, and you know that scripted part where they, where they start to do the call out, I'm not going to pretend that I know it, but they're speaking gibberish because they don't know what to say, because they don't realize that there is a prescribed text for that. With the bull, there is actually a set of fixed sayings. Now, here is where I have to applaud the Department of Culture for an initiative. I know we're not yet into initiatives, but the Department of Culture have received a grant from the UNESCO Cultural Fund that is going to be documenting the intangible heritage of St. Kitts. That project is being led up by Marlene Phillips at the Department of Culture. And for me, that initiative by the Department of Culture is excellent because they aren't just out there willy-nilly trying to just make a list. I have seen some of the research, and what they're doing is that they are interviewing, they're going and finding persons who know a lot of this, who know a lot of the history, and they are actually documenting this. So when that registry of our intangible heritage, our folklore, our cuisine, when we say that you're cooking coconut dumpling, I know coconut dumpling seems like something hard to get wrong, but trust me, I've eaten coconut dumpling and some people have gotten it wrong. So my thing is that, how should I put it? The documentation, the authentic documentation of our history. I have seen, do you know, something as simple as the children's SBAs for CXC? I've seen some SBAs, and the information in that, actually disputes a lot of our long-held beliefs about different things. And when I look at it, the children have done excellent research. Where is a repository that captures all of that? So yes, we need to know our history. We need to know our authentic history. And we also have to find mechanisms by which we don't just teach, but we integrate that into the day-to-day lives of all of our citizens.
I think that one of the challenges in terms of the definition of a unique culture to St. Kitts and Nevis has to do with asking ourselves, for example, Caribbean culture. We can talk about Caribbean culture, and so many of the islands have a culture that is so much alike. We grow the same type of crops. Right. Carnival, we have carnival and things like that. The dumpling, the saltfish, you name it. What is uniquely ours? What is really uniquely ours? What is it that we can say really defines Accitian and the Nevision?
Besides our accent.
Besides our accent. Now, Carnival is gone. But there's a question that has emerged out of Carnival and what we saw. Carnival, yes, is a part of our culture. We say culture is the way that we do things, it's a way of life, it's how we dress and all of that. But while Carnival is a part of our culture, is public vulgarity a part of our culture? So we have one hand, Carnival, we say, is our culture. It is tied up and so on with our history as a people. But then, how we behave in Carnival, the public display of vulgarity, simulating sex on the street and so on, is that part and parcel of our culture, or is it becoming our culture? Because culture is something that, we say it's dynamic, it's not static. Some people might say, well, people have license to behave in ways that they want within the society. But we are speaking about cultural norms, we are speaking about what you mentioned before, the mores and so on of the society. And it's a question that people have. What is our culture?
What is our culture? Yes, that is a question that people have. And when we talk about norms and mores, I'm going to get anecdotal again. And I'm going to go to a nearby island, Puerto Rico. Don't know if you have ever been on the super highway between San Juan and Ponce. Had a friend and we were going down to Ponce, going actually up to Ponce. And she said, well, you drive. And I'm on this highway, which has a speed limit of 55 miles per hour. And I am doing, I can't remember how much, well over 55 miles per hour. And with all due respects, I'm doing, I can't remember what it was, 75, 80 miles per hour. And cars are passing me, and not just cars, trucks passing me and backing at me. Woof, 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 woof. And she's hitting me and saying, you need to speed up. You need to speed up before the police catch us. I said, the police catch us? I said, why would I? I said, but I'm going over the speed limit. Why would the police catch us? He says, because with everyone else doing 100 miles per hour, you are impeding traffic and thereby endangering other persons on the road. So even though I'm speeding, I'm endangering other persons on the road. Now, how do we draw a parallel to that? In that, it's funny. The word "woke up" is a Kittian word. The rest of the world didn't know. Not only did they not know the word, but they didn't know how to walk up. Let's be honest here.
Mm-hmm.
I remember going down in the 70s down to Trinidad Carnival, and we all know how they did it. They spread their legs wide and they shake from side to side and they call it wine. And when they really wanted to get vulgar, they put their hands in front of them so that when the wine, you could see a bit more of a shake.
The pendulum
No,
swings.
right. So it was a pendulum. But while they were doing that, I saw some persons who were not from Trinidad looking at them and saying how vulgar it was. The first time that Elvis Presley was on TV, they only showed him from the waist up. Because Elvis Presley had the audacity to shake his hips on national TV. While we say that while persons have the public debate about the vulgarity of our culture, we must also remember that there can also be a public debate about what is vulgarity.
True, but we have an idea what it is.
No.
The society has an idea what it is.
No.
We bring our children, or parents bring their children to the parades on New Year's Day and on Carnival Tuesday.
Yes.
They bring their children to watch. And sometimes what we're seeing is that the children themselves are modeling their behavior from what they see the adults doing.
Okay.
Now the question must be asked, how is Carnival contributing to our social development? You speak about culture and social development. How is it contributing to our social development when you have public displays of vulgarity on the streets of Bastille, some of it being filmed and some of it being sent around here and further afield, of people actually having sex publicly?
And I will continue to be the devil's advocate on this. Right? I will continue to be the devil's advocate on this. And I will say that, for instance, when persons, one of the reasons that Africa was called the Dark Continent was because when the Europeans went there and they found that there were persons there that not wearing clothes and dancing in this with wild abandon, because we all know the wild dance from the masquerade came from there. So, in other words, my thing is, wait. No. So, my point is that I am not saying that I encourage or condone. What I am saying is that blank carte to say that all dance of that type is vulgar, to use a blanket. Now, are there individuals who, just like in any party, get drunk and really and truly start to do things that they should not do? Then yes, there are. And yes, perhaps we can, I'll put it this way, when persons come to our music festival and they get on the stage and they use profanity, we arrest them for use of profanity. So then the question is public profanity only, one, the spoken word, and two, the spoken word by foreigners on a stage? Are persons within a parade who are behaving that way publicly profane as well? Perhaps the discussion, therefore, is a lot wider and a lot more involved than we would like. And right now, I will not say that it is perhaps a discussion of culture. Perhaps it is a discussion of standards, which we understand are culturally driven. But what do we accept?
The standards have to do with the intangible culture. We speak about, our beliefs, our values. All of that is the intangible culture. And the intangible culture really drives the tangible culture. Because some of what we see in terms of our art, how we dress, how we speak, how we walk, our creative displays and so on, are not just there. They are driven by something else that we cannot see.
That is true.
Somebody might do a nice piece of artwork, but do you think it is just the artwork you are seeing? There are some things that what was in the artist's mind to paint that? That which you have not seen, which the artist has tried to depict in something that you can see.
And which we also try to interpret. Because think of it this way. Perfect example. Imagine that we are here. First, let's not kid ourselves. Senior civil servants sitting down in shirts and ties with no jacket on. A few decades ago, we would have been chastised for this. Mm-hmm. We would have been chastised. Why? Because that was the norm. Yes, the norms do change. Again, as I said, I agree. We do have to have a discussion of our societal norms. But I think that there are times when persons put the cart before the horse. When they say the problem is carnival, the problem is the parade, problem is when perhaps we need to ask ourselves, I will put it this way, everyone was not behaving like that.
No.
And there are persons who will not behave like that because their value system, which they received from their practices, from their norms within their household, within their family homes, prevent them from behaving like that in public. So, what can culture do? Back to that question now, right? So what can culture do? Is that culture can contribute to the establishment of norms within our families and our societies, which allow persons pause before they carry out any action. Because you know what? If we were in the Wild Wild West, remember the Wild Wild West? There were certain things. If you steal a man's horse, you could shoot a man at high noon in the middle of the road, and persons say it's a fair fight. But if you steal a man's horse, he will string you up.
Okay, good. So carnival is not the problem. Carnival is not the problem, and there are some people who watch and judge.
Yes.
There are some people who believe that I will not participate in carnival because of what I am seeing. I remember a few years ago, Bishop of St. John's Bastille, who resided in Antigua, decided that, look, Christians must take part in carnival. And by doing so, be an example of what carnival really should be. He received a lot of flack for it. But yet, it was Catholic, by the way. And Christians had a presence in carnival. It was called Vitus Mass Troop in Antigua. And the troops always, they were well dressed. They had something to teach about the culture, about the Caribbean history, and all of that. And that was the church's way of showing people how to behave in carnival and what carnival is all about. So carnival is not a bad thing.
No. And let me also say this. One minor pin I'm going to stick, and that is the church's way to demonstrate how the church thinks that people should behave in carnival, not how people should behave in carnival. Because you know what? Pharaoh, remember him? You can play sailor and freight powder. Listen carefully. You can play mass and freight mask. Are talking openly. Okay, so that was an interesting debate.
Yes, okay, fine. We're running out of time, but so we speak about culture, about culture, national
Right.
identity, and the reason that that whole thing came up is that while we talk about culture and how it can contribute to our economic development, the
Right.
hosting of carnival and
Right.
so on, that generates money and so on. We can sell our...
And on that note, we have recently engaged the Sir Arthur Lewis Institute at the University of the West Indies to do an economic impact assessment on carnival, because we keep on hearing the debate back and forth about the amount of money that is spent on carnival. And one of the things that we never hear about is the amount of revenue that the carnival period generates for the country. So that is also, we are looking at both the economic impact as well as some of the social impacts of carnival. We have actually commissioned them to do a longitudinal study on that.
So you were saying that the cultural policy that is being drafted is driven by data and research.
Yes, right, yes, right.
It's driven. What about proper venue for the hosting of cultural activities,
Yes.
carnival shows and other things and so
Dance
on.
productions,
dance
etc.,
productions,
etc.
dance
Yes.
productions and so on. We need a proper venue.
Yes, we have currently engaged an architect, an architectural firm, with the help of our partners, the People's Republic of China, the Taiwanese government. And the process that we have followed is that we actually had meetings with different stakeholders, because one of the things about, we all know there was a project a few years ago to refurbish Carnival Village. The problem with it was that the total refurbishment would have cost, I think, somewhere around $15 million. And you are looking at spending $15 million on an outdoor venue that in reality would be vacant for probably 300 days every year. What we have done is that we have gotten with stakeholders, with Carnival, with the persons that run dance companies, theaters, sporting organizations, etc., etc. And we got with the designer and we fed all of this information in. So we didn't actually say, well, we want a facility with a stage here or whatever. We allowed him to come up with a concept. And the concept is a flex center that can be used from everything from indoor basketball to a convention center, to theatrical shows, to carnival events, to just about everything. It has breakout spaces. Right now, I think we are looking at a maximum capacity of somewhere between 4,000 to 5,000 persons housed indoors. And it's interesting because in discussion with the minister, the goal of that was actually redefined in terms of we are now not just looking at building a center, identifying each of the public user spaces within that center as single units. We are currently attempting to design a center that will have at least 7,500 hours of public use on an annual basis. That is our goal. So in other words, we don't want to build a facility that persons pass and take pictures and say, wow, look at that. Yeah. No, we want to make sure that we are building something that when you go there at 6 o'clock in the morning, persons are there. And when you're there at 10 o'clock in the night, that persons are there.
So the center can generate income as well.
And the center can therefore generate
People can
outcome.
rent it.
Persons can rent it. Persons, and not just rent the center.
Mm-hmm.
You should be able to, for instance, again, persons like me and you know Fernando, I'm gonna call his name on here, Fernando, old people like us, can go there and we can decide that we would like to use one of the basketball courts, or we use a breakout dance studio or a weight room or something, and we can use this for 2 hours each week, and we pay for the use of that. So in other words, we are designing a center that you don't have to find the money to rent the whole center. You can actually get in there, again, recreation, or it may be dance, it may be you can get in there and you can use some aspect of that center all the time. So I think I think by setting a target of 7,500 hours per year, I think that the minister has transformed the vision for it from just some place that is there for big things, and we are now making it more integrated into the community, into the use for the general public.
Okay, Mr. Knight, let's go to the phone lines.
All righty.
Okay, we are going to open the phone lines, and the numbers to call are 465-2555, which is the local number, and the overseas number is 1-718-577-2916. That is 1-718-577-2916. We await your calls. Working for you, good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Williams, and good afternoon, Mr. Knight.
Afternoon, sir.
Yeah, I have a question. Now, we claim to be an independent nation, but it doesn't seem so from all aspects. Now, we have Warner Park has produced many greats in different sports, and you cannot see not one name in there of those heroes and greats and champions that was trained and performed in Warner Park track on the ground. Now, if we are an independent country and we have local businesses in St. Kitts here, why should they cannot put back on the advertisement on care and cricket field fence outside and also Warner Park? Because if those people who do not want to see any local product that we have here, which may be our cultural way of living, if they do not want to see the label when you go in there, when the camera come around, all they want the camera to do is spot anything. Okay, fine. But when they come in, let them bring something to cover the names that they don't want to see on the wall. And when the game is over and they come back, the park and the fence belongs to us. So our advertisement could be seen to the local. Suppose the government want to advertise CBI and want a park fence. What the government got to do? Rub it off too? It's foreigners will come here and see the advertisement and the fence and patronize the CBI. So I don't think that is right, that we got to hide our own business. So I want to know when they're going to straighten out that, otherwise we will be heading to have 2 white elephants. We got one over there back and one apart, may come one. Thanks for listening, gentlemen.
Thank you. Working for you, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Okay, Mr. Knight.
Yes. Yes. I am actually unaware of the fact that it is a policy. Yes, we have
another caller. Working for you, good afternoon. Hello? We lost that caller.
Yeah, I am unaware of that it is a policy, but it is something that I think is a positive contribution by the caller, and I think that I would be more than willing to look into it and see how it can be done, and not just in terms of advertisements, but as the caller said, walls of recognition of excellence.
Working for you, good afternoon.
Greetings, good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon.
Yes, I'd like to say something to Mr. Knight. This is Brother Noble calling from the Bronx. My name is Cherry in Deerbe. I hear you mention about Deerbe. Deerbe being Kansas pasture is one of the most natural pasture in the entire federation. It being left there as a marshland for decades now. The cabal that we had from 1995 to 2015 ain't do nothing whatsoever for Kansas pasture. Nothing. All what they do, put up people on the other side of the Deerbe, jam them up by your school up there in some ridiculous basketball court, and this administration now, I keep complaining, patches. When are you going to develop Kansas pasture? Mr. Knight, I'm not blaming you, brother. I'm not blaming you. I'm talking to this administration that I supported and still support. But I am not supporting no administration that is not doing nothing for my community. I am not. Kansas pasture, all of the facilities in the federation. What? The people ain't deserve anything for decades now? Kansas pasture, look it right there. The brothers them have to. I was told, and I confirm this, the football team, they got to go to St. Paul's to practice. What kind of nonsense is that? I'm not blaming this administration. 100%. It was been happening for decades. But this administration must take blame. Mr. Knight, Brother Knight, what do you have to say?
Okay,
I'm
brother.
not blaming you because you're not the minister. And I'm calling on the entire administration again. 2020 should soon be here, And I'm not supporting no administration, no political movement or political party who are not doing anything for my community. The people being left out in the cold for too long. And something must be done for Kansas pasture.
Okay, sir.
Kansas pasture must be developed and developed now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Working for you, good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
I'm so glad that you brought up the working up Christmas there. The working up on the Gallivantrian. It's terrible. It's terrible. I don't know. That is not our culture. The working up look as if it promotes some kind of sex sin. That's how I look at it and see. I never go back. Oh, it's terrible. People do it because they want to. It's not no culture. We could walk up, we could dance, but if you see the type of walking up to, and the male behind and whatever, it's terrible. It's like you're in your bed having sex or somewhere in your house. It's terrible. I'm glad that you brought it up because some people say, oh, you know, it's Christmas and it's so to do. No. That's not so to do. That's not good. You could enjoy yourself, walk up, but not that kind of, I like you having sex. It's out of order. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your contribution, Mr. Knight.
Yes. First of all, to Nabu, there has been several discussions in terms of Keynes's pasture. One for sports, the other as a cultural center. The third thing is more for what it was initially used for, community, green space, allowing for persons to either use it for sports, for picnics, for all of that. I will say this, first of all, is that the Department of Sport, as I mentioned, the reason why the football team was going to St. Paul's to practice was because of a lack of lights. So we have actually already acquired lights and have already commissioned someone to get those lights up. So that means that very soon the football team will not have to go to St. Paul's. We have looked at different venues in terms of giving not just the Diekbe, but the Diekbe and the Parsons community a meaningful recreation facility. As you know, there used to be a playing field where the old police station for Diekbe was. Mm-hmm. And the sea blast, etc., it made it extremely difficult to, maintain. We are looking. We have already written to lands, asking them to identify an appropriate space that we can properly develop. But that's on the sports side. On the culture side, we have also been looking at, along with tourism, at Keynes's pasture, because I think Keynes's pasture is actually part of our heritage. We talk about our heritage, we talk about our history, we talk about all the days where, when you have Whit Monday and all of the churches go down and have their picnics down there, and we would like to see it developed so that it adds both cultural value as well as economic value to the community and to the people of that area, of Diekbe, where, as I said, so we don't want to destroy it to give them a sporting venue when we can give them the best of both worlds, where we can give them a sporting venue there and we give them something that actually adds economic value to their community within Keynes's pasture.
Sure. Now, Mr. Knight, there also was a youth policy that basically was tabled and gazetted.
Yes.
And in it there are 7 pillars.
Yes.
Care to enlighten us what those pillars are?
Right. The 7 pillars on the youth policy are economic participation, safety and security protection, education and lifelong learning, health and well-being, youth as agents of democracy, development, and nation building, youth and sustainable development, as well as youth development work and youth mainstreaming.
Now, from those 7 pillars,
yes,
what are the most urgent concerns? The pillars versus the issues.
The pillars versus the issues. The youth policy is a data-driven document, so that it was funded by the Commonwealth Organization partnering with the national, the UNESCO Commission. We were given a specialist in the person of Dwinette Eversley that did a fantastic job. I do have to say that. Miss Eversley worked, assiduously with the youth department to produce this document. But one of the things that she did from the get-go, and I will say this, when she got off the plane, the first time she came to St. Kitts and I met her at the airport, she had already been given a digital copy of the draft policy. And the first thing that she said is, I do have a question. What is the data behind this? Because there was something like, I can't remember how much, more than 10 pillars. And what she did was, she insisted on the creation of tools and the delivery of those tools to garner data as to as to inform the direction of the policy. Now, included in that data were the major concerns of youth. There are six that sorts of jumps out immediately. Gangs and violence, unemployment, crimes, which is non-gang related crimes and non-gang related violence in society, drugs and substance abuse, bullying, and broken homes and families. These were the 6 issues. Now, what the youth department has done is actually currently doing, I can say that I actually left them at the office working at this, is that they are looking at the pillars and they are looking at the issues. And what they've done is that they have created a planning matrix which matches up the issues against which pillars best addresses initiatives, and they are reframing, redefining, recrafting the entire action plan. One of the things, for instance, is even the activities that they have had in the past. What they have done this year is that in order for any of those activities to be carried out, they had to re-justify them based on the planning matrix, so that it's not automatic that, for instance, that there will be a summer camp, or that there will be a summer camp in the way that it was run in the past. Basically, what they're therefore doing is that they are looking to the future. They're actually creating a departmental strategic plan that looks towards 2022.
Okay, what is the Department of Youth doing to reach out to the vulnerable youths?
Okay. Well, as I said, right now they're in the crafting stage, right? They are in the crafting stage. So at this time, everything that is within their plan still has to be justified. So I would not at this stage begin to think. However, one of the things that I will say is that the youth department, as an advocate for youth affairs, one of the things is that they are partnering with several other organizations. They're partnering with the Ministry of National Security. They are partnering with the Chamber of Industry and Commerce, with Rotaracts, with youth groups, with the churches, with the community, because the real, how should I put it? The real difference in everything that they will do is if they can mobilize youth to take ownership and responsibility for their own future.
Okay. Good. Now the youth policy, we have a very young and vibrant population.
Oh yes, about 40% of our population is under the age of 30.
Right. And that is rather significant.
Yes.
To harness all of that energy.
Sorry for laughing, but yes.
And to put it into something creative,
Yes.
something positive, something that is, going to help in terms of development. We've been speaking about development, and really to make the young people feel that they are part and parcel of the society in which they live, and the important contribution that they have to make in terms of development, their own development, personal development, and the development of the community in which they live.
Yes. And there are several initiatives which I can speak of the broader initiatives. The youth department currently has a youth entrepreneurship initiative which we are hoping to expand and actually incorporate all of the lending agencies in the federation and the grant giving institution, because often we hear persons talk about running programs for business startup, but it makes no sense running a program for business startup if at the end of the day the persons don't have the means for business startup. So you have to look at access to capital. We all know this. If you are 30 something years old and you go to a bank to borrow money and you have the same resources as an 18-year-old who goes to the same bank, statistically it has been shown that 80% of the times the 30-something-year-old is going to get that money. If you have the exact same business plan, the young persons may actually have a better business plan because they're more in tune with the market. But the reality is, because of their age, they are at higher risk. And so we need to look at their access to capital. So that is one. The second thing is that we are still in the old British adage, if children should be seen and not heard. The young people in our society too often are showpieces. When we have a program, we take them and we put them front and center and we show them off so that we can say yes. But when those same persons begin to make a contribution, you say, no, this is not for you. The youth department must be a strong advocate of giving the youth their voice within the society. Because at 40%, you realize that if at any point in time, those young persons decide that because of the lack of youth democracy, because of the lack of the empowerment of youth, they are going to no longer participate, whether socially or economically, within our society. Our society will go both socially and economically bankrupt. So it is important that they are given a voice. The third thing, of course, is crime and violence. It's the 800-pound gorilla in the room that we do have to think about. And unfortunately, too many of our youth are victims of crime and also perpetrators of crime. And we do have to find a way to reach this at-risk group, engage them and understand from them. We can't, I'll put it this way, you can't just say it's bad. As we said earlier, education is acquiring all of the things which lead to a change in behavior. And therein, so all of these, these are some of the basic initiatives and principles that the youth department is currently working on to ensure that the youth department can have an impact on our youth so that our youth in turn have that great impact on our society.
You know, I was thinking, Mr. Knight, it goes back to, we spoke about sports earlier.
Yes.
Sports can have a positive impact on young people, teaching them many things, the discipline,
Yes.
the morale, and culture as well,
Yes.
in terms of the intangible culture, the values, the beliefs, and so on that we want to inculcate
Right.
in our young people.
Right. And currently, because of that, there is a ministry-wide initiative called the My Healthy Community Initiative. And what this initiative is going out into communities, using the youth department to harness the power and the energy of the youth, using the culture to engage intergenerational involvement. So the old, the young. Can you imagine you at home and someone knocks on your door and puts a flyer under your door and says that we are inviting the whole community to come out on Tuesday to dance masquerade with us. We have within our community, our Spanish community, they get together and they dance salsa, or they get together and they play baseball. It is within their experience. It is what defines them within our culture. And you realize what I said, within our culture, because in my opinion, our Spanish community is part of us. And we need to realize that. We need to embrace them and integrate them so that they are not outliers and therefore they do not become targets. Instead, we integrate so that if you target them, you target all of us. But just like how they can get together, then you know what? We can get together on a Tuesday and dance masquerade.
Sure.
We can do the quadrille and you can teach me the wild dance.
And I think you've introduced a good point here that culture is diverse.
Right. And we also want to do the same thing using sport as well. So that basically what we want to be able to do is that when you pass a venue, you can look up and you can see what happens Monday afternoon, what happens Monday evening, what happens Tuesday, what happens Wednesday. In other words, we want to be able to give purpose of engagement back to the communities. We think that if we can do that at a ministry-wide level, I think that we can find that synergy between youth, between sports, within culture,
Sure.
which will make a huge difference in our communities.
Right. Mr. Knight, we are out of time. Is there anything you would like to say while we wrap up?
Yes, I will like to. This is my first time on for this year. I really would like to thank my youth, sports, and culture departments that I think worked extremely hard last year, and I know will be called on to work even harder this year. So I would really like to big them up, to give special kudos to Mr. Wilshire, the Director of Sport, Mr. Mills, the Director of Culture, and Mr. Liebert, who is the Director of Youth, who are leading each of those organizations. And just telling everybody, watch out, because we are going to be coming their way bigly. In 2018.
You're using Donald Trump's word.
Big.
Anyway. Good. Well, I want to thank you, Mr. Knight, for coming on today's program and for speaking on such important areas within our society where our people can be developed, and how sports contributes to development, our culture contributes to our development, and how our young people contributes as well to our national development. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Well, I want to thank all of our listeners and our callers to today's program. We thank you for joining us. We appreciate you every week listening, calling in, sharing, asking your questions, offering your suggestions. I am Les Roy Williams. Next week, we will be back for another Working for You. Have a good day.
Working for You. A weekly talk radio program which highlights developments of national interest and the activities of your St. Kitts Nevis government. Join host Les Roy Williams as he presents news, views, reports, and interviews about everything regarding the activities of the Team Unity government and the building of our communities and the development of St. Kitts Nevis. Tune in and call in to interact with your government and share your views regarding the upward forward development of your community and our beautiful Twin Island Federation. Working for You is weekly, every Wednesday live from 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. on ZIZ Radio, Win FM, and Sugar City FM with rebroadcast on participating stations. Working for You.